Stories Between Us Anthology, where Black queer men's lives, love, and tension take center stage. Called The Night Shift. It's about two men, a quiet museum, and what happens when attraction finally steps into the light. Every night, around 11:42 p.m., Cameron rolled the collar of his security jacket down over his neck and tightened the Velcro strap of his flashlight holster. No matter how quiet the museum was, he still walked each floor like someone might be hiding in the shadows, waiting to take something they shouldn't. He'd been on the job for 7 years, mostly alone, mostly invisible. 6'3", dark-skinned, broad-chested, and heavier than he was in his 20s. Cameron moved with the kind of authority that made people second-guess whether they were allowed to breathe wrong around him. That suited him fine. He preferred the silence. It made it easier to forget how tired he was of starting over at jobs with men in cities that promised more than they ever gave. The art museum was downtown, just past the courthouse and bus depot. Most nights, the only people still around after 9 p.m. were the janitorial staff. Even then, Cameron only caught glimpses. A vacuum cord dragged down a hallway, a mop bucket squeaking across the floor, the faint scent of bleach, and he kept his distance. Not out of pride, just habit. He wasn't out at work, not exactly, but he also wasn't hiding. The way he wore his team jackets, the shea butter on his hands, the photos still pinned inside his locker, all of it was loud enough if you knew how to listen. And then one Tuesday, the new hire showed up. Not all at once either. First, it was a name on the cleaning rotation chart. Travis, 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. shift. Then it was the faint sound of a playlist leaking through wireless earbuds. Then finally he saw him. Brown-skinned, lean ass, in a black long-sleeve shirt that hugged his back too well to ignore. Mid-20s, maybe, a fresh lineup and small gold hoop in his ear. Cameron noticed him the way people notice themselves in mirrors. Something about Travis felt familiar. They never crossed paths directly. Cameron would catch glimpses of Travis, but it wasn't enough. Cameron had only caught the back of him once, moving quickly. No eye contact. Still, something about him stuck. He wanted to see him again. Later that shift, he left a note. A post-it note tucked next to a sculpture he knew Travis would end up cleaning. It said, "Bet you'll be thinking about me tonight," with a smiley face. The first night they shared space started with the museum's air conditioning unit not working right. It was a Friday. Heat lingered from the day. The marble floors were still warm under Cameron's boots when he clocked in. At the front desk, the building supervisor barely looked up when he said, "Maintenance request says you gotta stay posted on level 3 tonight. Janitor's working late." Cameron nodded, grabbed his tablet, and took the freight elevator up. Third floor held the rotating gallery, installations that changed every month. The current one was minimalist. Open frames, small lighting, long benches meant for contemplation. Travis was already there. He stood near the far end of the gallery, coiling a vacuum cord with his foot. His sleeves were rolled to his elbows. Tattoos lined one forearm. A name, a city skyline. Something scriptural but modern. He smelled like citrus and laundry detergent. "Didn't think anybody patrolled this floor," Travis said. His voice was low, like it had never been raised in anger. "It's usually empty when I get up here." Cameron paused to log his first rotation scan into the tablet, fingers slower than usual. He didn't look up right away. "I'm Travis," the man said, voice low but steady. like he already knew Cameron's name. Cameron lifted his head, met his eyes. "I'm Cameron. I've seen you around." There was no handshake, no small talk. Just a quiet moment where something settled between them, familiarity, maybe interest. Not much else was said, but it didn't feel like nothing. Travis moved along the edge of the room, wiping frames with a microfiber cloth. Cameron moved in the opposite direction, logging timestamps and adjusting motion sensors. But they were no longer alone in their routines. Every movement was observed, even when they didn't look directly at each other. Halfway through the hour, Cameron sat on one of the long benches. He was ahead of schedule. The gallery was cool again now, but his shirt clung to his chest from the earlier heat Travis passed behind him, set his cleaning cart against the wall, and returned with 2 paper cups. Travis walked in with 2 drinks in hand, condensation trailing down the sides. "From the break room vending machine," he said, setting one down with quiet precision. Cameron looked up. The cup was already halfway toward him. Travis's fingers were long, nails clean. No rings, no jewelry, just the kind of hands that paid attention. Cameron took the drink without hesitation. He gave a single nod. Travis sat across from him like it was routine, like he belonged there. They drank slowly, talking in pieces. Where they were from, how long they'd been on the night shift, favorite corners of the museum. Laughter slipped in, quiet and unforced. Somewhere in the middle of it, their feet bumped under the table and didn't move. Travis nudged his foot again. Cameron tapped back, then did it twice like he meant it. They went back and forth like 2 boys at the lunch table, flirting under the radar, chasing each other's rhythm just to see who'd stop first. Their knees stayed close, not touching, just parked beside each other like it was natural now. Travis kept glancing up between sips, smiling a little every time Cameron looked away. When their break ended, Cameron stood first. "You working this floor again tomorrow?" Travis nodded once and said, "Yeah, I'll be here." Cameron took the long loop around the gallery. When he came back to grab his jacket, a new sticky note waited under a new sculpture. It read, "You flirt quieter than I do, I like that." He smiled, folded the note, and walked out the museum. The next night, they didn't wait for coincidence. Cameron arrived early to the 3rd floor. Travis was already wiping down the glass cases, this time in a white tank top under his uniform, arms fully exposed. His biceps flexed subtly with each motion, tattoos shifting like they were alive. A fresh haircut, line up sharp, the same hoop earring. A different kind of presence now, like he knew he was being watched. Cameron didn't sit this time. He walked the perimeter slowly, eyes tracking the exit signs, the sensors. When Travis bent to wipe the lowest tier of the display, Cameron stepped beside him, close enough to feel the heat between them, close enough to smell the Manson coming from Travis. It was turning him on. Travis didn't move. His back remained to Cameron, shoulders square, almost like he was waiting. Cameron didn't touch him. Not yet. He pulled his phone out, pretending to check something. Then, when Travis stood upright, Cameron took a step forward, closing the space like it was always meant to disappear. They stood face to face, inches between them. One man carried height and muscle like armor. The other moved with lean, practiced control. Their bodies read each other in silence, steady inhales, locked stares, tension building in the space even though they hadn't touched yet. Cameron reached slow and intentional. His forearm slid across Travis's. Skin met skin, warm, dry, thick with friction. Travis didn't flinch. He angled closer, chest lined up with Cameron's. Their arms stayed pressed together, their faces now just apart enough to feel heat off their lips. The kiss came like an answer. Cameron leaned in and kissed him fully. Their lips connected with weight. Travis met it instantly, with no delay. His hand landed flat on Cameron's lower back, spreading wide, pulling him in. They didn't ease into it. They claimed space. Cameron felt blood move straight to his groin area. Both were hard. Travis gripped harder on his hip, dragging their bodies, belt to belt, thigh to thigh. The pressure between them was real. Their lips moved together like they'd been here before in another life. Cameron gripped Travis's waist, fingers locking into place like he needed to hold something solid. When they pulled apart, they didn't retreat. Cameron kept his hand firm around Travis's side. Travis's fingers stayed laced through the belt loop of Cameron's uniform pants. Their eyes locked like they'd just stepped across a boundary and had no intention of going back. Everything was different now, and both of them knew it. For the rest of the night, they stayed close, moving through the museum like a pair, not strangers. Cameron stayed in his orbit, never far. At one point, Travis reached into his back pocket, pulled out a folded napkin, and handed it to him. Cameron took it without looking, slipped it into his own pocket, and nodded. Once. They didn't speak again before clocking out, but the message had already been delivered. 10 minutes after his shift ended, Cameron changed out of his uniform. Just a pair of sweats, his gym bag hanging off one shoulder. He cut through the back hallway of the museum, heading for the locker room. The building had gone quiet. In his locker sat a folded paper note from Travis. It was his address with a note that said, "Here's my address if you want a post-work cocktail." Travis was no longer playing coy. Cameron didn't hesitate. He went straight there. It was a small apartment near the edge of downtown, above a closed barber shop. The hall smelled like clippers and old hair products. Cameron knocked once. Travis opened the door in sweatpants, shirtless, his chest still damp from his post-shift shower gold hoop in, hairline fresh. Cameron stepped in, closed the door behind him. Travis reached for him, confident, 2 hands to the waist, and pulled him in. Their kiss was slower this time, not cautious the way their work kiss was. Cameron's hand slid down Travis's back, then under the waistband of his sweats. Cameron pulled Travis to the couch and sat him down. He kissed across his chest, down his stomach, then lower, tongue and hands moving together, part massage, part studying his body. Travis leaned back, spread wider, then pulled Cameron up and returned the favor. Hands firm, tongue sliding between his cheeks, holding him there. No one asked questions. No one needed to. They kept going. Nothing rushed. Just 2 men taking their time, making the night stretch. Later, when they lay still, Travis's legs draped over Cameron's. Cameron's palm resting on the flat of his chest. The room finally settled. The only sound was the hum of the streetlight outside the window. Cameron looked around. A half-used bottle of lotion on the dresser. A basketball in the corner. A Protect Black Queer Youth poster thumbtacked to the wall. A print of Kerry James Marshall's work above the bed. This was a man who knew who he was. And Cameron, for once, wasn't looking for the exit. As Travis's breath slowed beside him, Cameron reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out the original post-it note and slid it onto the nightstand, visible enough to be found in the morning, a gesture of affection in return. Sometimes the most honest parts of us come out when no one's watching.
This story is called Missed Call from You. It begins with a late night call that should have been a mistake, but turns into a second chance for two exes. There was no voicemail at first, just the notification. One new voicemail, and a number Lamar hadn't seen on his screen in almost 2 years. The contact was still saved. It was his ex, Terrence. Lamar was sitting on his couch in a pair of basketball shorts and mismatched socks. His phone was lying face up on the coffee table, screen still glowing. The TV was on but muted. He had been scrolling social media without focus, letting time pass without much thought. The apartment was dark except for the soft, flickering light from the TV. It was 12:17 a.m. when the voicemail came in. Terrence's name lit up Lamar's phone like a glitch in the timeline. He stared at it for a beat too long, like if he looked hard enough it would change into someone else. He didn't hesitate for long. He pressed the call button. At first, all he heard was breathing. Then Terrence spoke. "Damn, I didn't mean to call you. I thought I was calling someone else. But while I got you, how have you been?" The sound of Terrence's voice made his chest tighten. It was familiar, but too close, like stepping barefoot into a house you used to live in, one you left behind for good reason. Still, the part of him that used to love Terrence didn't hate hearing him again. Terrence's voice was deeper than Lamar remembered, more grounded, but still soft, easy to listen to, like late night jazz. The accent was still there too, a little southern, the kind you couldn't fake if you tried. He said he was in Michigan now, back in his hometown helping his aunt recover from knee surgery. Said he was bored out of his mind, that he missed Chicago, sometimes, but not the version of himself he was back then. Lamar didn't interrupt, didn't ask why. He just listened, quietly, still. And when the line went quiet, neither of them hung up. They ended up on the phone for almost 40 minutes. They stayed in their separate spaces, Lamar lying in bed, one arm behind his head, the other resting on his stomach. Terrence didn't say exactly where he was, but Lamar could hear the quiet in the background. They talked about the last time they saw each other, their last argument, the silence that followed, the way some relationships don't explode. They just drift until the space between two people becomes too wide to close. Terrence said, "I fucked it up. I know that." Lamar didn't respond right away. He felt his chest tighten again, but this time it wasn't hurt. It was from the memories. He let the silence stretch before saying, "Yeah, you did fuck it up." Terrence didn't defend himself. He just sighed. There was something strangely intimate about hearing Terrence's voice again, not just because of what they had shared, but because of how they were sharing now. Quiet, slow, unfiltered. They weren't trying to impress each other. They weren't trying to fix anything. They were just telling the truth. At one point, Terrence asked, "You still sleep naked?" Lamar smiled, even though nobody could see it. "Sometimes, I don't think bodies should be covered up." They both laughed. That was the moment the conversation shifted. It didn't get explicit right away, but it got honest. Terrence said, "I still think about the sound you used to make. When you would come all over me. When you were holding on to me, telling me to stop." Lamar's breath jumped in his throat. He didn't tell him to stop. Instead, he shifted under the blanket. His hand moved lower, resting just under the waistband of his shorts. His voice stayed even, but his body was fully awake now. They didn't describe every detail. They didn't need to. There was just silence on the line. Comfortable, heavy silence. Both of them knew exactly what was happening on the other end. The call didn't end with a promise. Terrence didn't say he wanted to see Lamar. Lamar didn't say he missed him. Neither of them said, "Talk soon." They just lingered, holding the silence like it meant something. When the call finally disconnected, Lamar stayed in bed without moving. His body was relaxed, but his mind was alert. He stared at the ceiling and felt the residue of something unfinished but real. He didn't delete the number. He didn't save it either. But when the name Terrence came back to his mind, it didn't feel foreign anymore. It felt like something that still fit in his mouth.
This story is called Realtor Booty Call. 2 grown men, 1 staged home, and a realtor showing turns into something way less professional. The final showing was at 7:15 p.m. Last appointment of the day. Dorian was already tired, blazer slung over his shoulder, button up undone just enough to show skin but not enough to look unprofessional. He'd texted the client he was 10 minutes away, and Quincy had responded with a thumbs up. No extra exclamation points or emojis. That alone made Dorian take him seriously. The unit was staged well. Lightly furnished, neutral tones, corner windows. Nothing special. Nothing that would last on the market. He was hoping Quincy would hate it so they could stretch this out a little longer. By the time Dorian pulled into the private driveway, Quincy was already waiting. He leaned against the hood of a sleek but dusty car, sleeves pushed to his elbows. He was solid, mid-30s, clean-cut, with dark skin and eyes that didn't give much away. Just like the houses he was shopping for. Good bones and serious presence. "You Dorian?" Quincy's voice was deep, not overly warm, but not cold either. Dorian smiled. "Yep, I'm the only one with the key." They both chuckled. They walked the property slowly. Quincy didn't say much, just asked 1 or 2 practical questions, nodded a lot. But Dorian noticed the glances. The way Quincy's eyes stayed on him a little too long when he leaned to open a closet door. The way he stood behind him in the kitchen. Not too close, but close enough to feel his presence. By the time they reached the master bedroom, Dorian didn't bother with the details. He knew what this was. He'd had his share of flings with clients before. Never unethical. Just adults making decisions with eyes open. But this one felt more electric. Quincy stepped into the room. Dorian followed him in. "I'm not usually this easy," Quincy said after a beat of looking around the room. Dorian stepped closer. "That's all right. I'm very easy." They were flirting, no question about it. Just doing it under the business of paperwork and apartment talk. That was all it took. Quincy pulled him in first. No hesitation. Just a firm grip at Dorian's waist and a kiss with quiet certainty. Dorian answered with precision, his mouth parting as his hands moved under Quincy's shirt, tracing his body and muscles in slow, calculated strokes. The air between them got tense. They weren't reckless. They moved like men used to holding control. Dorian guided Quincy back gently, lowering him onto the edge of the staging bed, shoes staying on the rug, careful not to crease the linen. He straddled him without a word, jacket placed to the side, shirt unfastened 1 button at a time. Their chests met, skin flush but measured, sweat gathered, lips pressed to necks and jaws. teeth grazed without marking. Their hands met at waistlines. No fumbles, no rush. Just palms pressing, fingers rapping, friction building where it counted. They stroked each other through their clothes, slow and deliberate. Breath shallow. Groans low. Rhythm intentional. They didn't talk. Didn't need to. Every movement said, I see you. I want you. Let's not ruin the room. Quincy's hands were everywhere. Strong and rough, gripping Dorian's ass, spreading him open, sliding fingers down his thighs and between them. Dorian gasped, bucked, bit his lip. Then he pressed harder. They stayed like that until both of them were breathless, undone, messy, and laughing in that fucked out, satisfied way that only happens when the chemistry's too good for it to be casual. They stayed tangled for a moment longer. Then Dorian shifted just enough to look Quincy in the face. So you gonna rent this place or what? Quincy smirked, eyes scanning the bed beneath them. Depends. Does this bed come with it? Feels sturdy. Dorian let out a laugh, deep and genuine. You got jokes. They both chuckled as they got dressed, careful to straighten the bedspread and fluff the pillows like nothing happened. Dorian even picked up a staging brochure off the floor and tucked it back on the entryway table. You hungry? Quincy asked as he smoothed his shirt out. Dorian raised a brow. After all that? Hell yeah. Quincy grinned. I passed this spot on the way over. Greasy, loud, good fries. Cut two. The two of them sitting on the curb outside a late-night fast food joint, wrapped burgers in hand. Sauce packets everywhere. The hum of traffic in the background. They laughed between bites, talked trash about the housing market, swapped stories about bad dates and worse roommates. No pressure, no pretense. Just two men in the afterglow of something electric, sharing food like it was the best part of the night. Thank you for listening to Stories Between Us Anthology. You can find every episode on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Rate the show and leave a comment. It helps more people find us.